A year ago, I got an opportunity to try out the Cooke SP3 lenses at a rental house. And in that tryout, they told me these were an affordable lens that they will be willing to give me the full set to go experiment with during a weekend. So this year, I took them from their word. I'm not the type of guy you make a promise to and think he will not cash in. So I finally got an opportunity to make a short film with this set of lenses. And I should say they are quite amazing. Very, very amazing for what they deliver for someone who's not used to working with high quality or super expensive lenses. I think a single focal length that comes in at $5,000. That is more than like the amount of money I've invested in the Cine lenses that I own. I own the dual lens set of Apple lenses, and in terms of image wise, it's day and night difference. And I remember last year when I tried the Cooke Panchros, they blew my mind away in terms of what they could do, especially on an FX3. I was like, yo, I get why these lenses are so expensive and are highly regarded and why people love using them. But also, it's at the rate and level that I was at last year, just coming out of film school. It will make no sense for me to buy Cooke Panchro, but to be able to have the SP3's, which are basically lenses that were made, in a way to simulate what the Panchros do at a cost-effective base for people just starting out, people like myself, people like, I'm assuming a lot of people watch this channel. So in today's review, I think we're not going to talk about the technical things. There's a lot of people who've spoken about the technical aspects of it, especially people who sell these lenses. What I'm going to be talking to you about is just how I found using them and how they changed my workflow and some of the things that I've started to think differently about when it comes to lenses and when it comes just to the idea of image making, how I've evolved, especially after using the SP3's to make a short film. So the first thing that I got when I was on set was just how clean the image looked with these lenses on. Like it blew my mind that an image could look that clean. Granted, we were using the Sony FX9 to film, so I don't know how much that affected the final image we were getting. But in terms of even when I tried them on the FX3, they were super clean compared to the dual lens lenses that I use. Because with the dual lens, it's a super low contrast lens, but it has that vintage feel with the modern look. So it has character to it in terms of that lens. With the Cookes, I was getting this warm, soft touch to it, but they were super, super clean in terms of what I was getting. One thing that I did notice with them is when it came to, because we were filming some scenes outside, when it came to the highlights, it wasn't really much of a struggle to get, in terms of when I was overexposed and then you just put in the ND filter, it wasn't that much of a hassle. If I didn't get much flaring, there were parts where when we were really pointing harsh light into the lens that you get this rainbow sort of flare, but that's something that I'm used to getting when I'm on the dual lens. So for me, that adjustment wasn't something that's major difficult. The set that we had, it had 5 lenses. So we had the 25, 35, I think it's 25, 35, 50, 75, and the 100. I used all the focal lengths on the project, but my main hero lens was the 25 and the 50 and then a lot of the 75. So we mainly relied on 3 of the lenses. I didn't really use the 30, 35, which is something that comes as a surprise to me because I remember when I was in film school, I always say the lens that I would own would be a 35. And ever since I left film school, I've never used a 35. The most lens I go for is a 40, 43, because the dual lens, they do have this weird focal length, is a 43. And then on this one, I was mostly reliant on the 50 and the 75. And then when I needed to go wide, I would go on the 25. One thing that I would like to say out of the lenses, I found the image was the same. So despite which focal length we were using, the picture didn't really change. There wasn't much of a noticeable difference. One thing I would say is a con with the lenses is you could, I'm somebody who never cared about lens breathing. But one thing that I realized is where you really pick it up is when you have a subject in frame and you're on these manual lenses, when someone starts doing this, when you're filming and the focus puller is trying to keep up with them and the lens starts to breathe, that is a challenge because once the director says cut, they'll be like, I like that take, but at some point it got blurry and you're like, oh man. So there was those moments. So I don't know if it's the lens that was the issue or it was just the focus puller struggling with keeping up with the actors. My decision why I ended up choosing working with the Cookes was for the cost. So the cost for them for the 5 set was like $395 for a set of 5. And an offer that I also had on the table was to get the Sigma Cine lenses, three focal lengths at the same price. So I was like, yo, this is a good opportunity to try the Cooke Look. And one of the things that you get is, when I was speaking to the director and the director is telling me their vision in terms of what type of look we were going for. And they're speaking of it's a drama, it's a comedy, and they were giving me their references. For me, when I hear drama, I just think of the Cooke Look, and the high stakes. And that is something that I would like to speak about that I came out of whilst using the SP3s is when choosing your lens, right? So the final look of a film, the final look that we get, I'm starting to understand that it almost has nothing to do with the lens and the camera. It more has to do with the post-production pipeline in terms of just how that image is manipulated. Because the lens at the lens and the camera capture this information, right? And it's so reliant on the lighting that you're doing on the day. It's so reliant on the production design. And then, there are things that you can play with, especially with the exposure triangle, just to make sure that you're getting the right image. But the colorist plays a big role in terms of the final image that's given. And you want to be very careful where you invest your money in. I think one thing we know is garbage in, garbage out. And with these lenses, with these expensive lenses, one thing that you get is this high crisp image that's so much quality and gives you so much latitude to experiment with, to do a lot of things with. But one thing that I've learned is with each lens that you get, I think one challenge we have with such like short deck or with reference images is you're trying to create an image that's similar to someone else's image. But the thing is, you don't really have access to their post-production pipeline. And a lot of shows that we emulate have a lot of VFX in them. There's a lot of mathematical things that happen to those images, the final image that you get, that you're almost never able to replicate what another film process did. And what changed for me was I now have to determine the look that I'm going for and just know that what I'm doing, the tools that I'm using are helping me get there, and what tools do I need to get there. And then that's helped by when you go do if you have the budget to go do tests, when you go do testing, you have an idea of what you're looking for. Because a year ago, I had an opportunity to try out as many lenses as I wanted. And one thing that I can tell you is in the image that came out of the camera, I couldn't really tell the difference. Like you could tell the subtleties in terms of how the bokeh is working, and you could tell the difference in terms of, an anamorphic from a spherical. But ultimately, with clean lenses, they were clean. With vintage lenses, they had vintage characteristics in them that they really didn't create any much separation. It just becomes about preference at that point. But there are things that you want to think about in terms of how does the lens and the camera behave in terms of your highlights? How do they behave in terms of your shadows, in terms of skin tone? Like, is that something that you're going for? And how much of that are you going to manipulate in post? So when you're thinking about which lens, which I think will help you with cost, the one thing that also you don't want to fall victim to, especially when speaking to producers, and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot where they're like, all right, we want you to give us the same look as this $100 million movie, but we're not going to give you a budget. We want you to use whatever you have. And I think in those moments, you have the creative opportunity to determine the look that you're going for, which is something I feel like as myself, and I can only speak as for myself, like I haven't been coming up with the final look that I'm going for. And a lot of times I find myself when I'm in post and when I'm challenged on something, I can't really stand on it because it's like, I wasn't really going for something, it wasn't really an artistic look that I was going for. It was rather that just like this is what's available and we're just filming, and then we were hoping like when we were in post we'd find it. But I think if you determine the look, and this is a conversation I just had with the director, where I was like, we have to come up with the final look before we even go filming, so that we know when we're exposing in the right way, when we're doing whatever we're doing in the right way. That way, whatever equipment we get is to help us achieve the look that we agreed upon, rather than being like in post production, hey, colorist, come up with this because I was trying to go for this type of look. Because I just feel like that ultimately fuels disappointment. It's just like slapping a lot onto your video and seeing that it doesn't work just because that lot wasn't really designed for what you were going for. So I think when working on these low budget or no budget projects, the main thing you want to do is come up with the look that you're going for, and then use the tools that you have at your disposal to help you get there. I would recommend the SP3s. If you can afford to buy them, buy them. If you can afford to rent them, because I think they just help to create a different image from a lot of cheap options, that are out there. There's nothing wrong with every lens that's on the market. Each lens just presents a different opportunity and a different way of working. And you have to use those things to your strengths to determine the image that you're going for, and understand that your post production pipeline determines a lot of what happens with your look, rather than the camera or the lens itself. And also it's about what you're filming in terms of production design, in terms of what's on frame. How do those colors behave within the image? So in conclusion, some things I can tell you about the lenses was, when you're focusing on cine lenses, one of the things that you get is sometimes I tend to use a focus puller, like the manual ones, just because it's easier for me if I'm by myself, if I'm solo shooting. But when you have a focus puller, then you want to use either a wireless follow focus. I don't really like having someone next to me when I'm operating. So that's one thing. And one thing that comes with this is the focus gear is so thick that sometimes you can just remove the focus puller off and you just operate by yourself, because it's so thick and you can just roll with it. And the lens itself feels so steady, like they're well built. I think they felt like metal when I was holding them, and they just look elegant. They're elegant, and they're tiny, and they're very useful, especially when you're doing handheld stuff. They don't add too much weight to you, so you don't even feel them. Only the 100 mm is big. The rest of them feel like they're the same size, and they all really behave the same. So yeah, let me know what you think of the Cookes. The other thing that we have with these YouTube videos is you won't really see the quality of the image just because to the compression. So yeah, I hope you can see some things that you like that show the difference between these. I can only compare them to the dual lenses. That's in the lens that I've used extensively, and with that one it's super, like the contrast is almost non-existent, whereas with this one the contrast was there and they were warmer. And so yeah, in terms of creatively, I think I would use the SP3s, but I hope I can afford a Panchro soon and just experiment with those, because I really want to expand in terms of the gear that I work with. I want to work with this high-end gear, because I do believe that at a certain point your skills, they reach a certain point, and then the equipment that you're using can enhance that. And I feel like I'm at that point at this point. Let me know in the comment section what you think of the SP3s. Have you tried them? Do you like them? Would you recommend them? I think on my next project I'll be trying the Zeiss. I forget what they're called. I think CP3s. I'll be trying those out because I really like the clean look of the Zeiss lenses, and that's something that I'll really like to work with. See you in the next one.